Hello there. This is Benjamin Morse, and I'm here with another episode of Explain Yourself because we have a really great creator that's coming on here to tell us about a really cool book called Cascade. So let me bring in Ed Jowett, the creator and writer of Cascade. Ed, how you doing?
Hi everyone. I'm doing great, Ben. Thank you for having me back. I love that intro.
Thanks for coming back.
It's so cool. I really like it.
Well, thank you. No, it's great to have you back. And so you're here to tell us about Cascade, which I'm going to bring up on screen right now. But while I'm doing that, why don't you give me the sort of elevator pitch of Cascade and his world?
Sure. Cascade is the first team up for a number of heroes who've had their own comics. Now, of course, it's been written so that you can pick it up on its own, and I even wrote an update about it, like being able to pick it up on its own and read it on its own, because, well, we'll come back to that later, I'm sure, but the old Stan Lee quote about how every comic is someone's first comic, that's never far from my mind. But this robot Cascade that you can see on the image there, it seems like whatever the heroes did in the previous issue, she just got bigger, she got stronger. You pour more energy in, she grows. You punch her hard, she grows. And by the time the heroes sort of even vaguely came together and started working together, she was so enormous that she was almost unstoppable. So this comic is continuing from the previous. It can stand alone. Giant robot walking through the city. I think most people can get behind that. 4 superheroes primarily. And it's really a comic about teamwork, or to be more accurate, lack therein. So one of the things that always bothered me about superheroes when they come together to work together is they all do so completely fine. You know, you get the occasional stepping on each other's toes, but you don't get much interpersonal problem. You know, they're all on the same side instantly. They all agree on the way to do it. I'm going to pick on the Avengers movie, the first Avengers movie, which, don't get me wrong, one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. It's an excellent movie. But they've leaned very heavily into Cap's secret superpower, which is everybody listens to him and does exactly what he says as soon as he says it. No one really thinks for themselves very much, and no one comes up with their own plan and does it on their own because it's a better plan than his plan, and so on. They lean very heavily into sort of that unspoken Captain America superpower, right? This is a comic about people, right? All of the empowered. When I started this universe, almost 30 comics ago now, I decided that this was going to be a set of superhero comics about people, not paragons, not monsters, people who have superpowers. And especially since it's set very early in the emergence of superpowers, they're not, they haven't got an idea of what a superhero should be. And the 4 of these characters, they've all had independent adventures. They've all worked alone significantly. And they all know what they're doing when dealing with normal threats. And then Cascade comes along, and they are at odds. You know, we've got Violet trying to punch it. We've got Blue Shift trying to do the various speedstery things that you might imagine. We've got Lacuna being left to deal with the police who want to shoot him on sight. We've got Penumbra, who sees herself as the mastermind who's going to solve this problem. But she's also the person who brought them together, so they're looking at her as a leader. So overall, it's an incredibly dysfunctional team. And the reason I find this interesting, and the reason I can, I feel really able to write about this, is I'm a project manager in real life. So I'm a software delivery project manager. That's my day job. And I deal with teams on a daily basis, and a big part of my job is to make sure that they can work together. They do support each other's strengths. But without a natural leader or someone who's trained in leadership, teams very quickly fall apart. And that's fundamentally what this comic is about. They each, there's one point in the comic, one of my favorite scenes, where the 4 of them are all standing together, and it's like, so what should we do next? And every single one of them shouts out a different plan.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, well, great. And Penumbra just, oh God, fine, go do your things and I'll do my thing. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, that's not a team. That's not, you're not going to win this if you behave that way.
Mhm.
And the thing is that I don't want to, this is the second of a 3-part series. And I don't want, I've already written the third, the artwork's being done. I don't want, I don't want this to end by they magically make it a perfect team. That's not how this saga's going to end. They might win, they might lose. I'm not gonna spoiler on that, but they're not gonna come out as the perfect team who learn to work together and then resolve this issue.
Mhm.
They're going to come out as maybe some of them have gelled together as a team, but not all 4 of them. You know, if they met up again, they would still not be able to work together against a larger threat.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's the other thing. I think that quite often, you know, now I'm going to pick on Spider-Man. You know, I like picking on my favorite things. Spider-Man. He faces. Let's take the '90s cartoon series. One of my favorite instances of Spider-Man. He faces a supervillain every week. It's a new one every week, and he's just got to deal with it. And he never has any real impact from doing that. You know, it's just a new one. You know, you win against Vulture this week, and next week you're fighting Scorpion, and the week after you're fighting Venom, and whatever. And it's just like, oh yeah, well yeah, fine, that's the way it is. And I appreciate that they were trying to write episodes that were self-contained, and you know, I'm not. The thing is that you lose the reality of the situation because doing that every week is going to damage you. Right? Having to fight for your life every week against someone who wants to kill you is going to damage your ability to fight.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, I always thought that would be something that would be really cool to work with. Like, and some writers have done this, but I always think like if you just give a superhero like he has a year where he's got like a bad knee and it's just getting slowly better, but maybe he has setbacks. I mean, that would just be kind of a fun, especially some of your more overpowered characters. I think it would easily introduce some like some stakes and just a little bit more to work with as a writer. I would think.
I enjoy the mental health aspect of it too, because you know, like many other people, I occasionally suffer from mental health issues. You know, I get depression. I get, you know, I have problems just like 1 in 4 other people. And you know, the idea that something might have really affected you. You know, fighting that supervillain that nearly killed you might have really affected you. And in your next adventure, you're not just going to be gung ho and everything's fine again. You're going to have problems. I wrote an entire comic about that, about a character working towards regaining her equilibrium. It's actually Violet, the purple clad character that you can see on those pages there. I wrote an entire comic about her coming to terms with the fact that she nearly died and she just needs to be okay with it and move on. And that's not a thing that a person can do. You know, that's a thing that leaves something when you nearly die.
Yeah. I think that was something in
work through it.
Go ahead. Yeah. In the Spider-Man, I've never been, I like Spider-Man, of course, but I liked him when I was a kid, and you know, and I had a subscription when I was in my very early teens, and it was kind of the Mark Bagley era. And one of the things I remembered is he'd fight Venom, you know, and have some pretty nasty, you could tell Venom was like a different level of threat to him at that point in the comics. And he was like, if Venom was on the loose, man, he was scared. He was kind of being short with Mary Jane. She's like, hey, you're going here. You're going to hide out there. Like he kind of had some PTSD, and he was very much affected by it. He was like sometimes even making bad decisions because he was so freaked out that this guy was on the loose and he was such a serious threat. It really, without making a huge deal of it, and I don't think they took up a lot of real estate in terms of panels or pages or issues of the story, certainly. Everything was still pretty compressed then. But they really packed a lot in there that made this seem like, oh, this is big time serious. And that was still made an impact.
I really like that kind of storytelling because I think it. At the end of the day, I like a superhero story because it's an exaggeration of the problems that we face in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't fight supervillains, but I certainly have to deal with a-holes. And sometimes it does feel like I'd like to exaggerate that up and make it feel like it was me the superhero battling the supervillain. I'd like to exaggerate that up in my head, and I think the other thing is that when a superhero comes out of those encounters completely unscathed the next week, I think there's a little bit of, well, I'm not that tier. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm still pissed off about that thing that happened 3 weeks ago, and it's still making me short with my wife or whatever, because I'm still upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can make you feel like you're less able to understand their point of view because they just seem to be so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like inhumanly perfect. So I really like that larger thought.
Yeah. That's definitely something in that first Avengers movie you referenced earlier. They did, I think they did spend a fair amount of time in that first half of the movie, at least with them fighting, but it did feel pretty, just kind of there. Obligatory, I guess, is the word I'm searching for. You knew they were going to be a team.
I didn't not like it, but it got itself resolved very quickly. The minute the Chitauri come through the wormhole, there's no more problem. Everyone does exactly what Captain America says.
Well, see, I like that.
Sure, but
I like that because I feel like they got to that point.
It's Captain America's superpower is bringing people together. That's always been really the primary thing that he can do that no one else can do. Which, I like that for Captain America, but if you remove that superpower from the equation, then it shouldn't have happened that way, right?
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. So they had a character specifically there to do that thing, which of course works, and it's what everybody likes about him. And you're kind of saying, what if you don't have this guy that can just get buy-in from everybody, and then they work as a team?
He's got a plan that everyone's going to agree with, and they're just going to follow his leadership because.
Yeah. Yeah, so like Captain America earns that. He kind of wins everybody over one by one, and culminating with Iron Man, and then he's like, everybody's like, you know what? This is the guy that's going to be the quarterback and tell us what route to run. God, I told myself I wasn't going to work in an American-centric sports reference, but there we go.
There you go. You've done it anyway, but I understood it.
I couldn't help it.
Imagine that instead of Captain America, you've got someone who is a terrible leader. Someone who thinks everyone else is inept and incompetent. Deep down, that's what Penumbra thinks. Everyone else is less suitable for this situation than she is. Yeah, she needs help and she can see that, but it's like, wow, you're useless. You're coming up with your own plans and they're garbage. I don't even know why you would even think that was a good idea. It's like that's her attitude to it. It's very disrespectful to the other heroes. And that makes it very hard to follow her because she's rude, she's unpleasant, and demeaning to listen to what she has to say. Even
that happens a lot in real life. Absolutely,
it does. I mean, in a sense, she's actually modeled on someone I used to work with, who just thought that they could do it better than anybody else. Like no matter what anyone else was doing, they believed that literally anything that could possibly happen, there was no point in anyone else doing it because I'll do it better.
And I think people like that often, they do know that they can't do it themselves, but they're like, I just want everyone to be like extensions of myself. People don't generally work that way.
Now I delegated this thing to you. I trusted you.
Yeah.
But you made a bull's up of it for these 3 reasons that you should have obviously seen coming because I would have seen them coming.
Yeah.
So, like that's a terrible piece of work. Go away and do it again.
Yeah, I was
like, and oh damn, I could have done this in a day if only I'd done it myself. I could have done it in a day, but I've got a million other things on, and they've taken 2 weeks and delivered garbage. I did work with someone like that once. And from then, as I say, in my day job, I made it my mission to not let anyone take that attitude, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was at a restaurant a few years ago. We were on a road trip. My wife had found this place she wanted to try. They made this weird kind of pie. I forget. It's like tomatoes or something. I don't know. It was interesting enough. So we stopped there and waited for a while for a table, and we were sat down within earshot of the kitchen and waited for our waitress to come out for like a half hour. And I'm a people watcher and I listen to stuff and I kind of enjoy that. And you could hear in the kitchen, the owner operator was the woman who I think probably came up with this, whatever cuisine it was, and was running around lecturing everybody. Why are you washing dishes this way? Why are you making this that way? You do this first and then you do that. Basically micromanaging everybody to the 10th degree. And then she'd stop and say, like, why does everybody wait for me to approve everything they do and instead of doing it themselves? It was very obvious because she yells at everybody for not doing exactly right. So, of course, they do the exact thing you're going to do. It's like, okay, well, I'll ask you next time. Hey, boss, is this what you want me to do? Because, that's what we're here for. And I've never seen it was like a Sesame Street lesson, just the clearest thing ever. Like, yeah, this is why this isn't working out. This lady is just completely not learning how to manage or delegate or train anybody, and is just screaming at them. But it sounds kind of like that's the best example I've ever seen, but that certainly works out in real life a lot. But I think what you said earlier about taking things that happen to us in real life that are unique, that you could wrap a story around and kind of mythologizing them into a superhero comic really does work. When you recognize that thing from your life in something like this, you're like, oh yeah, I'm dialed right into that.
Yeah, that's what I like doing. I like finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, as it were. And superhero comics are a way of doing that. That's it's a really nice way of telling that kind of story.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, and I meant to mention earlier, we're recording this earlier, which you can probably tell it's daytime out. But all the links for this and the other books we'll talk about are going to be right down in the description, so you can head over to Kickstarter from there pretty easily. You've got 10 days to go for this one. So I want to make sure that while we're talking about this, if this looks cool to you and it sounds like your type of thing, head over to Kickstarter and get on this so you can back this comic.
Yeah, 77% funded. Very close.
Yeah, very doing a great job here. I love the artwork. I really love this image and a few others I've seen.
That is there for a reason. That is my favorite image from the comic.
That's a great image.
There is one tiny bit of dialogue there, and Penumbra says, maybe that was a mistake. Because she's just dropped a building on this cyborg when it was person-sized, and it comes out as this giant, this enormous giant robot now.
It got bigger. So my question was going to be, we kind of gone through the heroes a little bit, and you and I think have discussed them before, some of them at least. I know Penumbra, I remember. Now, tell us about this threat. I assume this obviously started in Cascade 1. Was this tell us about this threat and how they were introduced and where they're going.
So there's a lot of mystery around this threat, and I'm going to cover a bit more of what's going on at the beginning of Cascade number 3. In fact, when I get to the end of explaining, I will explain a little bit about what's going to be explained in Cascade number 3. Call it an exclusive for your watchers. There you go. Can't ask more than that.
Glad to have it.
So Cascade is really came from a device about this size. It's not much bigger than a phone, right?
Okay.
And Penumbra Tide, which was like a prequel comic to it, not necessary either. She stole this device. The whole comic's about her running into various individuals and stealing the device. And she steals this device at the end of the comic, leaves it in the fruit bowl, and goes to have a shower. Well, her friend, who she makes during that previous comic, walks in, and the last thing you see is her hand reaching for the fruit bowl for the device.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You hear a loud bang, and that's the end of the comic. Anyway, Penumbra comes out of the shower, and like there's a hole in her apartment, where the wall's gone. She quickly follows and finds, this sort of like Star Trek Borg looking, but her friend, but sort of Borg looking, got some flesh showing and some robot. And she has an attempt at stopping this thing, but she doesn't know what it wants. It just seems to be walking in a direction. but it won't stop. So she collapses a building on it, at which point it grows to that size, and we have that lovely panel right there. So by the end of Cascade number 1, it has been absorbing power from the energy grid. It sort of reached into a building and grabbed some power lines and drained the power of the city growing. And then it just walks off. And in fact, the top image of the Kickstarter, the main image there, that is it walking off. It's the cover of Cascade number 2, and it's walking off. Penumbra's watching it. It's just walking off out of the city. Oh, is the threat over? I wouldn't go that far. If you scroll down a bit, I think I did some pages. So all we really know is from its behavior, because it doesn't talk. Bit more.
Oh,
That's where it's getting all the power. If you keep going down a bit more. That one. So it just walks into the lake, and it picks up something from the bottom of the lake. No real understanding of what it is from Penumbra. Although it looks quite similar to the device that she had originally. And then it walks out of the lake in the next page, which I've got there as well.
I love this panel in the middle here with just this combines everything about, like you're a kid and you draw like planes fighting each other and a million explosions. Just the chaos of that coming out of your id. And this one's great. I love that picture.
The military's turned up. So if you go to the page after that, the next thing we find out about Cascade is bits fall off her and turn into small robots, which then encase people then lie on the ground. People do not get let go unless they are empowered. Empowered are let go. But no one really knows why. So by the end of this comic, you know that an army is being built. Each one of these is beginning to grow by absorbing energy and so on, in the same way as the original one. And it looks like the world is going to be taken over by a set of giant robots that each contain a human. In Cascade number 3, we're going to have the heroes encounter someone they have encountered before. In fact, I've got a picture of him here somewhere. There you go. This is Penumbra Tide, which was the prequel comic I talked about. But we're going to have the heroes encounter Monolith.
Okay.
Monolith is your on the surface of it, he looks like your relatively generic supervillain. However, he is behind this device. Whether he found it, whether he made it, is a bit unclear. But he is going to speak with the heroes and explain that this is a world that is much safer from attack, with everyone encased in a robot. They're going to be safe. They're not, humanity will endure. And there's a hint at something really rather unpleasant on its way. He doesn't go too far. He just explains that, yep, I'm responsible for this. And then we have a scene with someone we haven't drawn yet in the comics. We drew him for something else. We haven't drawn him yet in the comics. And Monolith goes back to this individual, and we find out this individual is behind Monolith. And this individual is an alien who says, yep, that was a pretty good bluff.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And that's as far as I'm going to go. That's spoilers for number 3.
Cool.
But yeah, Monolith is going to take credit for this for his own reasons. Which will be explained a little more in Cascade number 3 than I have just explained. But yes, there's a lot going on here. It's a very layered story, and if you're going to have 3 comics to tell it in, you better have a story with some depth to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good place to leave it for this part of our talk. Let me play a couple of quick messages, and we'll get back to talking about more of how you created the book and some of the things you do, to support it.
Click that mouse and warp into All Ages of Geek's website, your ultimate portal to everything geek culture. Here you'll find articles that speak your language, from the latest anime buzz to the coolest tech trends. Our mission? To celebrate geekdom in all its glory. Whether you're a gamer, a comic enthusiast, a 90s kid, or an anime aficionado, we've got something for you. Dive deep into them with All Ages of Geek.
Your comics take a lot of time and effort to create. Way too much to have them get damaged while shipping to your backers. Gemini Comic Supply mailers keep your comics safe in transit, and with the code GeekCollective10, you can get those mailers with 10% off your order. That's GeekCollective10. Enter it at checkout to get 10% off.
Yeah, definitely want to encourage anybody to head over to All Ages of Geek. They have a lot of great content there, and also other comic creators. I'm in the middle of fulfilling a campaign, and I ordered my supplies from Gemini and used that discount, and it ended up saving me a good chunk of money. So can't recommend both of those enough.
If they ship to the
UK. I think they. Well, I don't know if they do how it works out now, but yeah, that's at least here in America, it's still a great deal.
Very cool.
Hopefully
Very
that
cool.
remains cool. It remains true of the rest of the world.
Challenge for anyone who's not created a comic before. It is a genuine challenge sometimes to get it from A to B without it getting damaged.
Oh yeah, and I think that it's become really tough. I mean, I did international for my first campaign, and I lost my shirt on it. Really, I had kind of like, well, it's probably going to be triple. I'll assume it's triple what it costs here. No, it was even more than that, and there's very little rhyme or reason to it. It can be. Europe wasn't like too bad actually, but even Canada was way more. Australia was crazy, and that I can kind of understand. But yeah, it can be very tough to do, and that's with all the stuff going on that makes it a little bit tough to plan for. I think that's something people need to really factor into their Kickstarters. Is the shipping situation going to be the same now as it is in 5 months when I'm ready to fulfill, or whatever your timeline is? It's definitely a very big challenge we have going for us right now. But to get back to Cascade, maybe also add some of your other work. You're a really prolific writer. You do some role playing, you do some books, just normal books. You do comics, and you've done a lot of them. So how you did issue 1 of Cascade. This is the second one. There's going to be a third that wraps it up. I get the impression that this world you're building is going to be ongoing. Is it going to be like a series of miniseries like this, or is it going to something like? And then I'll do Penumbra for a few issues, and I'll do, this person. How do you kind of see this evolving?
So the way that I started this all with Lacuna's comic. That's the gentleman that you've seen in some of the pictures there.
Okay.
And when I started, I had no idea exactly what this was going to look like. But what I did is I made Lacuna, I made Blue Shift, I made Violet, number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, right, I need to have some kind of a plan here, right? I knew that I wanted to do my version of, I've just picked on it, but my version of the Avengers movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do it sort of in not too dissimilar a way to the way that Marvel did it, with the movies building up the character, the individual movies building up the characters,
mm-hmm.
to then bring them together and not have to introduce everyone for the first time in that movie. So while it is a standalone and you have to get people in 5 seconds, it can actually be watched standalone, even if you've never seen the other movies. It does actually
mm-hmm.
work. So I realized that, this was where I wanted to go. And what I did was I sort of designed an arc of 6 comics that would lead up then to Cascade.
Mm-hmm.
However, I kept having more ideas, which is a very common thing that I say. I kept having more ideas, and what I decided to do was basically run 2 parallel sets of stories. One is
mm-hmm.
the ones that are going to end up in the Cascade book. Those 4, Penumbra, Lacuna, Blue Shift, and Violet. And the other ones were the ones I spoke with you about previously, which are Drift and my brain has suddenly stopped working. Drift and Vigilance and Lobo and Fauna, mostly. And Melkart. Sorry. Melkart was more of a self-contained one. It was that was always going to be a one-shot because of the way that it was written. It's a comic about time travel and particularly closed loop time travel, which is something that I'm quite interested in. So what's ended up happening is I've actually written 12 comics and then Cascade, which will be 15 total, 22-page comics. I've written some other bits and pieces as well. But what I decided to do was basically make, I guess I'd call it a phase 1 trade paperback. Trade hardback, maybe by the time it's... Because it comes to about 400 pages in the end.
Yeah, I was going to say, this really adds up.
So maybe it's a trade hardback, in fact, not a trade paper. I mean, here's one of my tabletop role-playing game rulebooks, and this is 420 pages. So that gives you an idea of roughly how big that's going to be. It's quite large. So, I decided that what I'm going to do is that, right? I'll build phase 1, and then, don't get me wrong, I've got loads of ideas written down for phase 2, but I'm going to complete phase 1, draw a line under it, say, right, that was my first set of superhero comics, and now I'm going to make my second set of superhero comics. I've got the next set of stories I want to tell. Because this first set of stories were about heroes who didn't know what they were doing. They were duped, they were fooled, they were manipulated, they were confused and lost when faced with the situation. They were trying to work themselves out. But phase 2, I guess it's more about lies and the effect that lies have on you. Just, if I were going to say a broad theme for phase 1, it would be, one word, it would be uncertainty. And then the phase 2 is going to be more about lies. It's going to be about manipulation by someone else outside who's deliberately doing it, who's deliberately misleading you, who's telling you not the truth in order to get a reaction out of you, which is to their favor.
Okay.
So even beyond lies, I'd say almost as far as manipulation. And that lets me introduce, a character that I would call a master planner, as it were. I think it's going to be a really interesting set of comics. I've actually already, because of the way things went with Cascade, I've actually already written one of the comics of phase 2 already. And actually completed the artwork and the lettering and everything. And I just...
Oh, wow.
I don't want to put it out yet because it's sort of reliant on Cascade and what I already knew was going to happen in Cascade.
Yeah, you don't want to spoil that part of it.
I don't want to... Yeah, I don't want... Well, it's less that it would spoil it and more that no one would really understand what I'm saying or why.
Gotcha. Or just tonally it doesn't quite fit.
Happening is sort of dependent on the end of Cascade.
Gotcha.
So... I think that I'm really looking forward to that. I'm talking about another phase of a similar number of comics, 15 to 20 comics. I've got a note about it here somewhere. Oh, I left it in my filing cabinet down there. I've got a big filing cabinet down there as well of things I haven't done yet. I've got some notes about what I want to do. I want to do a 3-parter for Violet because I've got a really good idea. That I was working with Jennifer Martin, who's my co-writer on Violet. We want to explore more about her parents. We want to explore more about how it is to be stuck in this way. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the opportunities that writing more comics brings. But yes, you're dead right. There is so much more to happen. I mean, this is phase 1 of potentially 20. For as long as people want to see the comics, I'll keep making
absolutely. Yeah, no, that sounds like a really good way to do it in that I know every writer, I think, starts off with like this magnum opus thing, which that's not going to get published or, and it's even hard to kind of convince readers, I think, to buy into something like that. See, on the other side of that, you want something that has legs. It's like, well, I'm going to get invested in this and that's just it. I want something that could go on. And I think that structure, which sounds like it's kind of based on the Marvel movies, and I think it's a good structure, is, just take something that it's a good story. It has a reason for happening and all that stuff, but it goes on to the next thing. And I think you can kind of even continue it. And I think it gives you flexibility in that if something is just not hitting, or maybe nobody's buying superheroes in 2 years, you could kind of continue the story with some adjustments. You can move things around is what I'm saying. And it can be part of the larger story, but you can rebrand it. Essentially, that's what I should have said starting out. You can kind of rebrand it on the fly as needed, or start something new, but it gives you an opportunity to maybe do both things and test things out as well.
I think the other thing that's good about it is being able to draw a line under the person who taught me more about writing comics, who's also my co-writer on Cascade, is Jonathan Lewis, good friend of mine, a really nice guy, really, really clever, really good at what he does. And the most common thing he says to me and complains at me about is, Ed, I'm a better writer now than when I started this comic, so I could write it better, so I want to go back and do it again. And it's like, okay, no, I mean, I get that, and obviously, that's probably how you should feel. You should feel like a better writer after every single comic. I respect that about him. But at the same time, you sometimes need to give yourself a break. And for me, here is phase 1, drawing that line and going, right, that was my first set of comics. And I've learned a lot during, right? I've kept the things that I'm good at. I've improved the things that maybe I was a little weaker at in my first couple of comics. Pacing is something that I've learned a lot about over the last 10 years of writing comics. And, I wanted to get further along that road. So, being able to draw a line under it, say, right, that was phase 1. Now I'm going to do phase 2, and phase 2 is going to be different. And I'm not going to hold myself beholden to the mistakes I made in phase 1 and just go, well, I've got to live with the fact this is one long series. And no, I don't. I can go, right, that's the thing that happened. And now this is the next thing that's going to happen. And I'm going to treat it as a separate thing. Yeah,
almost like the evil. I'm not a huge horror fan. I liked Army of Darkness, though. And that kind of made me go back and watch the other ones. But, it's something that definitely works. And the things they've done since work, and that are somewhere in the middle. You have these very just cabin in the woods horror stories. And then the third one is a little more action adventure, kind of fantasy thing. And that's the one I liked, but it was cool that they could do that and have the chance to do it. I don't see why a lot of the story, in comics, you have every opportunity to double down on what you're doing if it's working, emphasize the things that are really resonating with people. But then also, if you're like, boy, I feel like it's petering out a little bit, maybe I take this in a direction, and I think it can usually work with most types of plots and stories, and steer it this way or that, and do some A/B testing and things that work. One thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned you showed us your role-playing book before. I've seen a lot of stuff on Kickstarter. Comics is doing really well, but is dwarfed by the video games, the card games, the role-playing games, and certainly the board games people do there. I've kind of been thinking about branching out and doing maybe a card game based on my comic or something like that. Just to do it because it'd be fun. And my larger story, I think, has places where I could fit in an in-continuity story that would work, but also maybe hopefully to bring in people from other parts of Kickstarter with a little more foot traffic to maybe get them interested in my characters and my stories. Have you ever tried doing it like you've done other games and stuff? Have you kind of tried to cross promote a little bit and, really make something that works for both?
So I made this one. It's called Era Survival Colony.
Okay.
And it's based in my Era Survival tabletop role-playing game universe. It's a post-apocalyptic role-playing game, zombie apocalypse. The thing that makes it a little different to your average zombie apocalypse story is the apocalypse happened 100 years ago, and now humanity is just dying out. In another 100 years, there won't be any more humans. We're dying out. We're becoming infected. We're dying off, starvation, plague, whatever. And what happened was, it's funny actually. I'm sometimes a bit reactionary in the way that I create. My role players were playing this game, and they were saying, "Oh, but it's so easy to run a settlement in this world. Why are all the mayors that we come across why are all the settlements so crap? Why are they all barely surviving?" So I just said, right, okay, all right. So I made this game, and it's for 1 to 4 players. You can play it on your own or with up to 3 friends.
Mhm.
And all you have to do is survive 8 turns. That's it. 8 turns of this world throwing absolutely everything it can at you. Zombie attacks, raiders, theft, infection, famine, migration of your food animals away, all of it, everything. And
Very cool.
I sort of reacted by going, no, you're gonna have to play this and then tell me that the mares are crap.
So something I've been...
no one tells me that anymore.
Okay. So what I've been a little curious about lately is what goes into creating a TTRPG book. I mean, you create the book obviously, and all the artwork and writing it goes in it. How much is stuff like that in terms of the gaming? And then this is, I guess, true of the card games as well. With my question, how much of that is kind of an existing way of playing these games that people do? I mean, I know people use 5e and Dungeons and Dragons as a spine for a lot of other things. How much of that do you have to come up with completely from scratch, and how much of it is based on like a system people are accustomed to, and you're producing a variation of that type of gameplay that is in your world?
So that's a really good question, and the answer is it really depends on who you're talking about. So the people who make 5e effectively modules, very little mechanical thought needed. Maybe you tweak a spell or two, add a few new spells, whatever, that sort of thing. But, I actually have a whole bookshelf of other people's games down here that you can't see on my camera. But many of them are D20 based, basically whatever D&D was at the time. Some of them are old enough that they're D&D, I should say, 2nd edition. Yeah. And some of them are 5e. So I've got everything in between. And in that situation, you don't have lots and lots of mechanical stuff to come up with because the answers already exist for you, more or less. So my games do not run on a D20. They run on multiple D10s. Okay. I'm not going to claim it's a completely original idea. It's not by any means. The first time I experienced a multiple D10 dice pool system was the Storyteller system, which White Wolf uses for games such as Vampire the Masquerade.
Okay. A friend was trying to get me to play that in college, and they handed me a few sheets, and I was like, nope, this looks like homework to me. I'm going to go play video games and do college things.
Fair enough. There was also a video game, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Which is that right? Okay, yeah. Cool.
It's an excellent game. They were going to make a sequel, and I think it tumbled after Kickstarter or something. I'm a bit vague on it.
That rings a bell. It sounds like something I might have browsed past.
There's also a Werewolf the Apocalypse game on the PlayStation, which I discovered only quite recently, which runs on the same rule set. Cool. So they use multiple D10s. They have a variety of rules, and what I did was take what they've got and then rebuild it from the ground up. That concept of using multiple D10s, yes, I kept. That concept of attributes and skills, the general concept I kept, but I changed what they all were. I completely modified the way in which my characters get built relative to them. It took me 2 years to perfect the system, and that was for this one here. I mean, not technically it's that one, because this was the original rulebook that I did, Era of the Consortium. Yeah. My sci-fi role-playing it. You're talking about everyone makes their magnum opus. This has 500 years of playable history. Cool. So I feel a bit called out by that magnum opus comment. You're absolutely right.
No, that's appealing. I have so much lore in my head about one of my comics that doesn't really have a home in any particular story, but I do just kind of want to put it somewhere, and that sounds like a good place to do it.
But it took me about 2 years to put that together. Okay. Endless play tests, and oh no, I don't like that. I don't like this. I want to change this. I want to change that. And the thing is that while all of my games run on the same broad paradigm of multiple D10s, I think it would probably be fair to say that I've constructed 3 systems in total. One is still underway. I'm finishing it off.
Mm-hmm.
First is Era D10. The second is called Era D10 Lite, which does not work as similarly as it might initially sound.
Okay.
It's more that, you know, it is on the same principles, but it works quite differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is the system that I am creating for Era Soul Mist, where I'm throwing away something like 90% of everything about the way it works. Era Soul Mist is a game inspired by Dark Souls.
Okay.
And I want to... So there has been an official Dark Souls role-playing game, but I played it, and in my opinion, it doesn't reflect the feeling of playing Dark Souls. So I wanted to make a game that really does, right? Not something that reverse engineers the mechanics that are in the video game or something like that. I want to make something that feels like playing Dark Souls when you're playing on a tabletop.
Okay. Very cool.
And that's taking a totally different approach to, I mean, combat, initiative, all of the things that most people think of as basic for a role-playing game. I'm doing something that I've never seen before, and I've looked at hundreds of role-playing games. I'm just trying to reinvent how that works to give the right feel. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing to me as a game creator. It's about, you know, if I make a game about, you know, which is a Final Fantasy inspired game, I want it to have the feeling of playing a Final Fantasy game. I don't speak idly. I have indeed done exactly that. Era Lost Legend. It's got the pros and the cons of a Final Fantasy game. It's got the negatives that what you really want to do sometimes is just sort of sit there and grind because it would make the thing you're about to do easier. You know, you could level up by grinding. And it's got the pros. It's got all of that depth of story. It's got that world. It's got crystals. For people who like crystals, it's got crystals. And it lets me explore different ways of doing things that don't necessarily suit, you know, the things that I did in Era Lost Legend would not work for Era the Consortium or Era Survival, but they're not supposed to, right? That's not what I'm going for. I'm trying to build a game in a certain way. I've made a game called Battle Cruiser Alamo, where you play as 2 characters at the same time.
Oh, it's fun.
One on board a starship and one as a sort of a marine in the meat grinder, you know, who's probably not coming back. I've made a game where your choices or the results of your choices matter, and you have a karma score as a result. You know, you might do bad things, but intend good, but you still did bad things. You know, even if you intended good, well, that's bad karma. I've got a game where you play as a diesel punk shark ninja fighting alien robots who are obviously powered by diesel. They've enslaved humanity, and so that to drill oil, so they can make, you know, so they can power their diesel-powered fleet and invade the universe. And the shark ninjas that you play as, they're fighting to free humanity, not through altruism, but because people taste better when they're free range.
Oh, okay. Just take what help you can get. Well, I like your approach to these things. I mean, just to wrap it up, it sounds like what you do with your comics is very much the same as your approach to games. Is you're taking stuff that people are used to in the case of like superhero comics or certain play systems or environments for your games, but then you're also saying you're looking for opportunities, I think, to make each of your experiences unique. And in which case, some cases that's gameplay, some cases that's the way your characters interact or their approaches. And I think that's something that's it's just a good approach to have. I think that's fun for readers, and it's I certainly think it's fun as a writer and creator to do things that way as well.
Yeah,
but,
I've always loved telling stories and being able to put a little bit of uniqueness in, you know, tell that story that other people might not be willing to tell. whether that's for a role-playing game that I've created, to take a risk, because, making a Final Fantasy inspired game, there are a lot of downsides to Final Fantasy. I'm a massive fan of the series. Like almost every game I've played and enjoyed, but there are still downsides to that kind of game. And to translate those deliberately onto the tabletop so that your experience feels similar, that's a risk. That's putting your neck out there and going, you know what, I'm going to take that risk because what I want to achieve is this.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day,
that's what you got to do.
Vision, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's anyone watching, as long as you remain true to your vision, you'll never be disappointed in what you create.
Yeah, and I think you do have to have that kind of mission. It doesn't mean you have to do this type of story, that type of story. You can't change it, but I think you're focusing on the experience you want to create overall. It gives you a good way to base your creative decisions on. You've got this framework that's like, ultimately my goal is this. And when you're at a fork in the road, I think I've found that creatively it makes it a lot easier to say, while there are things I like about both of these things, I know this is the thing that makes my story stronger. It makes it a better experience for the reader.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So we're going to go over a few other books before we come back to Cascade. So give me just a minute here to switch over. So the first one I want to highlight for everybody watching later is I Need Your Skin. Title of the book, not something, which I've run into before.
That's a hell of a name.
A lot of it's very tough to figure out how to say a sentence without that sounding weird. You have to almost really put some dividers in there. But I'm going to get used to it because we're going to be talking about this book a lot. My friends Joey Galvez, Key Collective, and then some other people, Alan Dunford, who's created Grandma Chainsaw and a bunch of other books. And a great team is putting together this book, which is a supernatural comic. It's about a woman who's afraid of aging and makes a bargain with a mysterious character to try and forestall that. You can see some of the interior art here. I think this book it's really moving along. The interiors are still coming in. I just saw some new artwork for it today that was beautiful. So head over at the link below and get on the pre-launch list for this one because it's coming together pretty quickly. And they should be ready to launch pretty soon. This one especially, I really love that cover. Next one I want to talk about is Angel Hunter. This one's from Rich Davis. We were supposed to have him on a couple weeks ago, but I think we will pretty soon. This is kind of a very anime-inspired. To me, I get like a 90s anime vibe or a video game vibe from this, where humanity is kind of left in a world with angels and demons fighting over them or dominating the place. And you've got these great characters with different powers trying to figure out what to do about it. Very dramatic stuff, cool artwork, a lot of energy, and I'm looking forward to learning more about this one, but you can get on the pre-launch at the link below. Next one is another book that's live now. You're going to probably see this in a couple days from now from when we're recording, but this should still be live when we post this one. Orson Welles' Warrior of the Worlds, graphic novel about Orson Welles and his secret adventures. I think everyone is familiar with the 1938 incident. It's just one of the great all-time stories. I think you can kind of see the approach here as like, what if it was really, it had some basis in reality? I'm a huge fan of that particular era, and I'm a big fan of Orson Welles. So I think this is just some great artwork. It's a creative premise. It seems like a ton of fun. So head over there pretty quickly to back this one while it's still live. And then the last one I'm going to mention is my book, We Are Scarlet Twilight, Cobalt Crisis Part 1. I have 30 or 40 books left to fulfill on the countdown to Cobalt Crisis, which was the lead into this. But this is the follow-up to We Are Scarlet Twilight. It's basically if Crisis on Infinite Earths had taken place in the 1940s. So you get all those big events that you see in like Secret Wars or Crisis, characters dying, big twists, big changes, dramatic armies of superheroes doing things, but seen through the lens of the old pulp adventures and the Golden Age comics. I wasn't sure I was going to go back to this world, but I had a basic plot that I liked, but I just didn't think did enough to make it worth, it wasn't a worthy successor, I thought, to the first one. But when I was reading Crisis one day, I thought this actually, if it was done in that style, that would be different, that would be new, and it would be interesting. And once I kind of put that together and made the whole thing work, less a little bit of sci-fi, but more kind of comic booky stuff in there, I was like, this clicks and it's worth doing. So this is going to be 8 parts total. Once I'm done fulfilling those comics I mentioned earlier, this one will be ready to go. So get on the pre-launch list at the link below, and you'll be the first to hear when it launches. But just before we leave, I want to mention Cascade again. I really love everything, Ed, you've told me about your story and your approach. The artwork is fun, bright, and it sounds like a really appealing story. So anybody watching, you'll have a little less than 10 days when you see this, but you'll still have time to go over and back this one and make sure you get your copy. Ed, aside from the Kickstarter, where else can we find you online?
SOVcomics.com is the easiest place, and we've got all our socials at the bottom of that page, but very quickly I'll rattle them off for you. We've got facebook.com Shades of Vengeance, all one word. We've got Twitter, well, X it is now, isn't it? Shades_of_venge, because character limits. We've got Instagram at SOV Comics. We've also got a Discord community. I think, yeah, we do. We have a TikTok. I'm not sure I post on it as often as I should. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not brilliant at social media. I love talking about my work, as probably anyone who's watched has observed, but I'm not brilliant at getting on social media and talking about it. So I think we have a TikTok at SOV Comics. But I've not posted on it in a while. We've got, if you're into audio dramas, we've got a Patreon for our audio dramas that we do. Some of them are audio dramatizations of our comics. That's patreon.com/Erascapes, ERASCAPES, Erascapes.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, it sounds great. I love talking with you. The book looks great. Congratulations on that. And hopefully we can get a few more eyes on it, because this is a fun book, and I think a very fun universe. But Ed, thank you again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, everybody watching, I hope you've had as much fun listening to this as I had talking about it. And we'll see you soon with a new episode.